Welcome back to Racing Rundown. It is that time of year once again, the 2022 Kentucky Derby and the 2022 Kentucky Oaks. Obviously, as you can tell by the title of this video, we're talking about the 2022 Kentucky Oaks, and this is our preview. Eric and I are back once again like we did this last year. We're going to run through every single horse, all 14 of them. Should mention there is a 15th horse in this race, the also eligible, so in the event that there's a scratch before, I think it's 9 o'clock in the morning, on Friday is the deadline for whether or not Beguine could get in with a scratch, but a full 14 field at right now as of this point. We're going to give every horse their opportunity. And as we've said throughout the course of our Derby previews, and like we said last year, we're going to give our picks, but we're also going to try to help you find your pick in this race. This is a very evenly matched Kentucky Oaks. It was very difficult to pick. I had a lot of difficulty separating some of the top horses in this race. So it's definitely going to be a fun one. There's a lot of cool stories in this Oaks, and we're going to get into it right now. I'll turn it over to Eric, who's going to talk a little bit about the potential pace setup in this race, and then we'll get into the number one horse, Secret Oath.
And as the saying goes, pace makes the race, and of course, that'll be ever so apparent in a full 14 horse field. Initially, it looked like this would be a spot where last year's 2-year-old filly champion, Echo Zulu, could actually get away with a pretty favorable setup. As we'll discuss, she has a lot of speed, and that's been her greatest weapon, and compiling 4 graded stakes victories to this point, including 3 grade 1s. But after the draw, it turns out that might not be the case. The horse directly to her inside, Yuugiri, one who shows plenty of speed, and she went wire to wire when winning the fantasy last time out. And then there'll be some pressing types in here as well. Tunerloose, the 14, the 3 Hidden Connection likes to be forwardly placed, the 8 Venti Valentine. They don't want to be on top, but they want to hustle the leaders a bit. So not necessarily a bad thing for those horses. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe one of those stalkers run a big race, those Hidden Connections or Venti Valentines. But I think if you're playing 6th or back, it's honestly going to be your best position here. So the speed will soften up just enough, and playing further back seems like on paper that's how it's going to play out. And I will also mention, just with the also eligible, the 15 Beguine, she is one that would like to be forwardly placed. So if she does end up drawing in, that'll even more so kind of favor those come from behind runners.
So now we'll move on and talk about the number one horse. One of those come from behind runners. Secret Oath, the one time could have been favorite for this race. She's 6-1 right now on the morning line. We're not going to get too much into the morning line. Everybody has voiced their displeasure on both this morning line and the morning line for the Derby. I don't really feel like getting further into that, but we'll get into Secret Oath, the filly. And this is a filly that back in the earlier part of this year, I think I said at one point or another on Racing Rundown that she would win the Kentucky Oaks. Now, that was before a lot of other circumstances happened. Let's get to the good things, at least from my perspective. I'll get to the good things about her. She has won in her races against 3-year-old fillies. She has won 3 straight very impressive races, 2 of them stakes races, the Honeybee and the Martha Washington, and of course the New Year's Eve allowance race where she finally showed that she had some potential throughout the course of her career, but she finally showed that she could be able to put that together in a really strong victory. And then she had the 2 walkovers in the Martha Washington and the Honeybee, which she didn't really beat anybody. It didn't really do a whole ton to her resume, but we thought that potentially she could be one of these really good 3-year-old fillies. But the thing about Secret Oath that's really softened me on her since the Honeybee is really the run that she had in the Arkansas Derby. We haven't done the Kentucky Derby preview yet, but if you listen to my Derby profile, I was not a fan of Cyberknife. Eric was not a fan of Barber Road, and that does not reflect well on Secret Oath. A lot of people have been looking at the Kentucky Derby and say, or excuse me, the Arkansas Derby, and have said, well, Secret Oath ran a huge race there. And I will give her credit. She did run a really good race in the Arkansas Derby, just purely based on looking at it from the perspective of her in that one race. But I don't look at that effort that she had in the Arkansas Derby and say, this is a top 3-year-old filly. And I'm going to say that. A top 3-year-old filly wins that Arkansas Derby. Cyberknife and Barber Road are both going to run up the track in the Kentucky Derby, and Secret Oath couldn't beat Barber Road. And, you know, I'm not going to get into takes from the Kentucky Derby because this is the Oaks episode, but Secret Oath should have won the Arkansas Derby if she was good enough to win this race. And folks have been blaming Luis Contreras for the loss in the Arkansas Derby. Stop. Luis Contreras did as much as he could have done to win that race. It was not his fault. The horse just wasn't good enough to win the race. And, people say he moved too soon in the race. Okay, well, if he had waited an extra furlong to move, Cyberknife got first run on Secret Oath. When even when Luis Contreras moved when he did, Cyberknife still got first run on her. So if he waited an extra furlong, Cyberknife is just getting even more first run on Secret Oath. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of that, Secret Oath never got to within, I think, more than 2 lengths of Cyberknife. Or I should say less than 2 lengths of Cyberknife. And if she didn't do that moving when she did, I highly doubt that if she waits another furlong that she's getting anywhere closer to Cyberknife than she did. She ran as well as she could have in the Arkansas Derby, but she wasn't good enough to win that race, and I really don't think, looking at the Arkansas Derby, she's going to be good enough to win this Kentucky Oaks, because there are some good other 3-year-old fillies in this race. And I think the thing about her is she was inflated because she was running against truly awful fields in the Honeybee and the Martha Washington. She won those races. I'm not going to say she doesn't have talent, because she won those races the way that you would have wanted to see her win those races. However, she wasn't beating anybody there, and I think that those victories were definitely inflated by the level of competition. So I actually tossed her very quickly. I know as recently as last Tuesday, she was off of my win contenders, which is kind of crazy to say about a horse that I thought one time this year would have been the winner of this race. But that's just how the Oaks Trail goes.
And I'm definitely a little I'm looking at Secret Oath in a bit more favorable light. I thought she endured enough problems in the Arkansas Derby, not necessarily rider error, just more so troubles from other horses. She was really wide throughout. It was understandable last race, and I'm not going to hold it against her. But I just didn't think her wins were against great horses. I mean, I know that Yuugiri was third in the Honeybee that Secret Oath won so impressively, but I don't think Yuugiri's that. The Arkansas road to the Kentucky Oaks has just not been that strong in general. So that was my big knock, is that she's not really been battle tested. And then she was kind of battle tested in the Arkansas Derby if you hold those horses in high regard. I do not. So she's a tough read, but I go back to her loss in the Goldenrod last year. Maybe that just wasn't her day, but she can have a bad race. That is no doubt. Did she get better from it? Absolutely. But I think her wins were kind of inflated by lesser company and ideal runs. And she faced some trouble in the Arkansas Derby, and look where it got her. And this is the toughest field she's ever faced, and we know that even with a decent field like she faced in the Goldenrod, she can lose. So I wouldn't be surprised if she steps up and runs a massive race, hits the board, even wins. But I totally get why people would be against her. There's a reason I don't think I'm going with her on top, because she leaves you wanting more, I think, even with these impressive wins. And she seems like less of a sure thing with each passing day.
And now we're going to move on to the number 2 horse in this race, and that is Nostalgic, the winner of the Gazelle Stakes. Very nice progression from this filly. First start as a 3-year-old was on turf in the Swedish Chant. I'm completely tossing that race out. It really, in my opinion, doesn't really reflect anything on her going into this race. So I'm looking at her 4 dirt races. 3 good victories. She broke her maiden at Belmont in October of last year nicely. And then as of late, she had her 2 victories, and obviously the aforementioned Gazelle victory. You look at the Demoiselle, though, and that's the one bad race that wasn't on turf for her. I think that was just a little bit too soon for her. She was going a mile and an eighth. She was stepping up from going a mile and a 16. So it wasn't like she was going from some really short distance into that race. But I still think that was too soon. But you have to look at the competition that she was going up against there. Nest is the favorite. Venti Valentine's in this race, and she won a stakes race. And Magic Circle was a good 2-year-old filly. She was stakes placed a few times. She won, I think it was the Busanda at Aqueduct, on Aqueduct's road to the Kentucky Derby, the Kentucky Oaks. And even though Magic Circle's kind of fallen off, at that point she was still graded stakes caliber, could place in some graded stakes races. So she was running against some really good 2-year-old fillies at that point. And like I said, I think it was too soon for her. Obviously, I'm discounting the turf race. Her last 2 starts, though, have been very, 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 very good races. Almost 7-length victory in the allowance at Gulfstream, going a mile and a 16. Stepped up in distance a mile and an eighth in the Gazelle, and she won over Venti Valentine, a horse who I thought was a lock in there. So she definitely earned my respect there. And I think just the progression in the 2 starts that she's had this year, it seems like Bill Mott has figured this filly out. And, with Bill Mott, it can take him some time to figure the horses out. But when he figures them out, they usually fire their big one. So I think she's got a huge shot to run well in here. She's a good price right now on the morning line. I imagine that she'll stay somewhere around that 15-1 range, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. But there's a lot of reasons to like her going into this Kentucky Oaks.
100%. And I think maybe it wasn't even so much Bill Mott as it was nostalgic herself. She broke her, for reference, she broke her maiden by 8 lengths, but it was probably the ugliest 8 lengths you'd ever see. She was as green as could be. She was all over the place. You could just tell she had no idea what she was doing out there, but she was just running. And then that came to fruition in the Demoiselle and the Swedish Champ. But I read an interview. Bill Mott said that the light bulb seemingly has really gone on, and when you win your 2 next starts leading into one of the biggest races of the year by a combined 8 lengths, that's pretty good evidence that's been the case. She improved a ton heading into the Gazelle and speed figures. You always love a horse that's moving upwards, unless they have excuses, which she hasn't had any excuses in her last 2 races, right? So that natural improvement has been exceptional. And I think she sits a good trip. She'll probably be mid-pack early on. I would think probably like that 8th to 10th range. Could be a little closer depending on how aggressive Jose Ortiz wants to be. But all in all, she's improving at the right time. Looks like she's building up for a good peak on Kentucky Oaks Day, and that could carry her a long way, of course. Certainly one I think you need to consider at least underneath, and obviously a win contender isn't too much of a stretch either.
Now we're going to move on to the number 3 horse in this Oaks, and that is Hidden Connection, referenced a little bit earlier when we were talking about the potential pace projection of this race. She's coming out of the runner-up effort in the Fairgrounds Oaks, where she almost beat Echo Zulu. The big victory in her career was the flashy 9-length victory that she had in the Pocahontas. As a 2-year-old, she went from that race into the Breeders' Cup, and then she didn't run too well in the Breeders' Cup. She didn't break well there, and then Echo Zulu kind of just merry-go-rounded them there. So really, she had no chance in the Breeders' Cup. And then she was coming off the layoff in the Rachel Alexander, and she didn't run well there. And I'm not crazy at all about anybody from the Rachel Alexander, and I'm not crazy about Hidden Connection either, but I think Hidden Connection, you can look at that and say she probably needed the start. She only had 3 starts going in to the Rachel Alexander, and so you could look at that and say, okay, maybe she needed that race off the layoff. Still some inexperience. Still wasn't great. I don't feel good that she lost that race, but you can look at it and say, okay, there are some reasons to at least not be completely 100% alarmed by this. And then last out, she almost beat Echo Zulu. And, if you are a regular listener of Racing Rundown, you know how much I've trashed on Echo Zulu basically ever since she won the Breeders' Cup. And that was about as close as Echo Zulu possibly could have come to losing that race. So good run there in terms of her getting the job done against Echo Zulu. But the figure didn't come back very well. So if you're a speed figure person, probably not super crazy about that. But the other thing you have to realize is she's got that really flashy stakes victory at Churchill. So you know she gets over the surface. And she's a price right now. She's 20-1 on the morning line. Everyone's complaining about how that's an awful price. So I guarantee you she's going to come down from that. But there's no way that she's going to be second or third choice in this race. So you're going to get her at some kind of price. She's got some upside, definitely, going into this Kentucky Oaks. And at the right price, she could be a horse for you in this race.
Yeah, I totally think so. And I think she's going to sit that good trip where the leaders do enough to soften each other up, and then she can take that first run at them. And obviously she's going to kind of be inside, so Raylu Gutierrez will have to work his way out from that point. But all things considered, it does set up pretty nicely for her. My issue is she just hasn't been able to finish the job in her last 3 starts. Her first 2 wins were so great. She owns a very impressive win at Churchill Downs, having taken the Pocahontas last year. That's exceptional. But then you look at the running lines, 2 losses to Echo Zulu, finishing behind Tunerloose and Goddess of Fire in the Rachel Alexandra. That's concerning to me, especially given that Tunerloose and Goddess of Fire weren't awful in their final preps, but certainly weren't incredible. And the numbers will reflect that. Just got to watch the races to tell you that. So I think there's still some weaknesses to her where it's like it just would feel kind of like I'm stretching to really say, yeah, she can beat some of the other top contenders in this pot. I think the price will definitely be there. She'll get the right setup, but you just have to wonder if the talent is there when facing this level of horses.
Now we're going to move on to the morning line favorite, number 4, Nest. And Nest has been very, very impressive in her last 3 starts. And This is a horse who, as in her last start as a 2-year-old, excuse me, looked like she did what she wants to do, which was going 9 furlongs in the Demoiselle. And I'll get into the Demoiselle to the Kentucky Oaks route in just a minute. But she definitely wants to be going longer. The longer, the better for her. And she got that opportunity in the Demoiselle. I talked about that earlier with Nostalgic. I mean, the back class is there. She has the best back class of any horse in the Kentucky Oaks. And she, from that, has cut back 2 times, doing things that she doesn't necessarily are not the most ideal for her. The Suncoast at Tampa was going 1.40 miles. The Ashland was going 1.16 miles in the short stretch at Keeneland. She crushed it in both of those races. So she is coming into the Oaks in spectacular form, and she's getting back out to what she wants to do, which is 9 furlongs. The only loss of her career was in the Tempted, when she was going 7 furlongs, way too short for her. But it should be mentioned, the horses that finished in front of her, Magic Circle, who was a good 2-year-old filly. She's not quite that good anymore, but she was a good 2-year-old filly. And Gerrymander, who was grade 1 place behind Echo Zulu. So not losing to bad horses. And you have to consider that, and I should correct myself, that wasn't 7 furlongs. That was a 1-turn mile at Belmont Park. But same idea. 1-turn race, definitely not something that she wants to be doing. And I think the fact that she's getting back out to the 9 furlongs is very good. Now, I want to talk about the Demoiselle. Obviously, last year, Malathot won that race en route to a Kentucky Oaks victory. Horses that have run in the Demoiselle, there's some good form with them. 3 of the last 4 horses that have been in the Kentucky Oaks from the Demoiselle have run really well. Malathot, obviously the winner. Positive Spirit was in the Kentucky Oaks, but I'm going to discount her because she didn't get to run in the race because she got tripped up early in the race. Wonder Godot was second there. And then going back to 2016, Lewis Bay was third in the Kentucky Oaks after winning the Demoiselle as a 2-year-old. So there's some really good form from horses going into the Kentucky Oaks out of the Demoiselle. And I think that that's certainly a reason to like Nest. Obviously, you have to like her for that powerful victory that she had in the Ashland and the fact that she's got the best back class. And the thing about her is she hasn't done anything wrong up to this point. And I can completely throw out the Tempted and not really get too worried about that. The last 3 victories have done everything that you would have wanted to see from her. I'm not comparing her to Malathot, but she's following that Malathot progression. And I think she's in a better position in this race, or coming into this race, than Malathot was, because she had 2 starts coming into this, and Malathot only had 1. So Nest has a ton of upside coming into this race. I didn't pick her. I'm going to spoil it, but it was very difficult to not pick her in this race because she's just the safest pick in the race, in my opinion.
And you mentioned the Demoiselle, Jack, and of course it's been very, very productive in terms of the Kentucky Oaks, but more so when you look at Todd Pletcher's record when it comes with Demoiselle winners getting to the Kentucky Oaks, or just in general. I mean, he's won the race now 7 times, including Nest, but the 6 before this, you had 2 Oaks winners, Malathot and a Shadow. He's had horses placed like Unlimited Budget. And he's had Black Eyed Susans, horses that didn't run in the Kentucky Oaks, went to the Black Eyed Susans, ran really well there. Breeders' Cup did staff winner and stopped charging Maria. Point is, when he has a filly that wins that race, they every single time have gone on to do something great. And Nest is obviously already a grade 1 winner since then. But I just think it makes a lot of sense to heavily consider her based off of not just that, but winning by 14 1/4 lengths over her past 2 starts. The Suncoast was easy. The Ashland was somehow easier. The field in the Ashland wasn't incredible, but it was good enough. Where beating Cocktail Moments and Awake at Midnight, further back, things like that, not the greatest thing. There's certainly others with that class, but I think all you need to do is go back to that Demoiselle, where Nest did finish in front of a couple other Kentucky Oaks runners, and then you realize, okay, that certainly can't be a problem. So it's hard to knock her. You're right, Jack. She checks basically all the boxes. She's never lost her around 2 turns. And she's well bred for this, right? Like it just all makes sense. Bred on the same exact cross as Malathot last year by Curlin out of an AP&D mare. So the positives just keep adding up. You always have to worry about potential traffic trouble with a type like this if she could find some. But I also think she'll put herself well into the race. I mean, I could see her being 6th in the early stages. Those early stalkers and speed horses that I mentioned at the top go out, and then she'll sit behind them 4 or 5 lengths off the lead and make the move from there. So, yeah, really hard to knock her. And once again, she's another one where it's kind of crazy if you don't use her in some way.
And now we're going to move on to the second of three Todd Pletcher horses in this race, Goddess of Fire. Definitely less well regarded than her stablemate, Nest, and that's rightfully so. I mean, looking at her career, she's only won one time, and that was her career debut at Saratoga. And as a 2-year-old in her 2 stakes races, she was very much well beaten in the Pocahontas and then well beaten in the Tempted. There were good horses in the Tempted, but she was well beaten there. And then in the 3 starts this year, she's been second in 3 races that I would describe as not anything that I'm overly crazy about. The Rachel Alexandra is probably the one that I think the least of. She did put up a good fight against Kathleen O in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, but I'm not going to look at that race and say, okay, Goddess of Fire is going to be a strong Oaks contender out of that race. We'll get to Kathleen O in a little bit, but I'm not sold on how good Kathleen O is, and it's just Goddess of Fire has never really had the ability to get the job done and get a victory outside of her maiden race, and she's stepping up to the toughest field that she's gone up against in her career. I don't really see how it changes in this spot.
Totally. I think it's very tough. Obviously, she's run some good races, pretty close to winning the Rachel Alexandra. She's placed in 3 other stakes. She's been good, but she hasn't been good enough to really cement herself here. I think the fact that she doesn't have a real tactical advantage either. A lot of the other horses that have better resumes are going to sit similar trips, so it's not like she can get first run on them unless things change. And just all in all, she's never been able to put away average horses in this race and then a really good horse in this race like a Kathleen O. And that's going to do no favor. She's another one that did improve from the second to last start to the last start on all metrics. That's a big positive. And she didn't run awfully in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, but it's just fair to say, hey, I just think she's probably a cup below in here.
Now we're going to move on to another horse that is probably a cup below, and that's Yuugiri. She is coming out of a stakes victory in the Fantasy, but it should be mentioned that she wasn't really going up against any really quality horses there. Before that, she was crushed in the Honeybee by Secret Oath. I already made it clear how I feel about Secret Oath, so obviously I'm not going to think too highly of her. And then a couple of starts, she was second place in the Rags to Riches and the Goldenrod on the 2 Stars of Tomorrow cards at Churchill Downs. But Dreamlith has not come back to do anything special as of late, and the horse who won the Rags to Riches also very much disappointed in that Goldenrod. So, and I think she also disappointed in one other race. I can't remember what the race name is that she disappointed in. But point being is that she was running behind some horses that I don't think highly of, and then in her 1 stakes victory, I mean, let's be honest, she won the Fantasy because Secret Oath ran in the Arkansas Derby. If Secret Oath had been in the Fantasy, Yuugiri would have run second or third behind her. So there's, for me, not really a whole ton of upside for Yuugiri, and she's also going to be forwardly placed. As Eric mentioned, we don't think that they're going to go overly fast in the Oaks, but I think that Yuugiri is going to soften Echo Zulu enough that she's going to take Echo Zulu out and also take herself out in the process.
Once again, exactly what I'm thinking. It's, she was never close to Secret Oath the one time she ran against her, and then even before that was getting blown out of the water, and then the Fantasy win was not against much. The runner-up, Begin, who's also eligible in this race, she's coming off of a maiden win, and then back in third was a literal turf horse. Brad Cox has said that she's a turf horse in Bubble Rock. That's basically all you need to know. She's just a couple low in every way, but she is a major pace presence, and that's kind of a big reason that she's here, but we already talked about that. So pretty easy one to look past.
And now we're going to get to the reigning Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies winner and the likely pace setter for this race, Echo Zulu. She has not done anything wrong per se in her career, but the biggest thing about her is that she's coming into this race out of obvious regression from her 2-year-old form in the Fairgrounds Oaks. I'm actually going to read off of my notes specifically for this race because I wrote down every reason why you should be against Echo Zulu, why you could be against Echo Zulu in this race. She's coming into this race off of 1 prep. She hadn't run since the Breeders' Cup. The Fairgrounds Oaks is her 1 prep. Obvious regression from 2 to 3. She was winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies by 5 and something lengths, and then she barely got the job done in the Fairgrounds Oaks. She's got a sprinter heavy pedigree. I'm not crazy about the prospect of her getting an extra 16th in this race. She barely got the extra 16th in the Fairgrounds Oaks. You want to add another 16th to that? Not crazy about it. The history of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. 2-year-old fillies regress fairly often. Echo Zulu was actually the first Juvenile Fillies winner to win her 3-year-old debut since Songbird. So that was between 2016 and 2022, 6 years, zero winners. And then everything that I've said about Echo Zulu since the Breeders' Cup. If you're a listener to Racing Rundown, you know everything that I've said about her. We have been banging the drums that, she was not an overrated 2-year-old, but she was a good 2-year-old, but was probably going to be, if she was going to be anything as a 3-year-old, she was going to be a better one-turn horse. And I specifically said in the episode recapping the Fairgrounds Oaks that she was not going to win the Kentucky Oaks. That being mentioned, I did consider her for a very long time. The reason I did that was because it looked like she could potentially trip out. However, unfortunately for her, with the way that the post draw went, she's not going to trip out in this race. She's going to have to deal with Yuugiri. She's going to have to deal with Venti Valentine, potentially other speed horses. And I just don't think with the questions about her getting the extra 16th were already there. And I think without tripping out, I see it I don't see how she wins this race without mega tripping out. And there's one other thing that should be mentioned. The Oaks is not a race you can steal on the front end. There's one notable exception, and folks out there who like Echo Zulu might say, well, hold on a minute. You say that, but a sprinter pedigree horse a sprinter that was able to stretch it won the Oaks wire to wire in 2019. And yes, I do understand that Serengeti Empress did that, but that was the exception, not the rule. Echo Zulu is not going to win the Oaks. I said it on I said it on April 1st, and I'm going to say it now on May 2nd. Echo Zulu will not win the Kentucky Oaks.
And I think that it's kind of crazy to think of how many people agree with you, Jack, me being one of them. She obviously is not too well respected on the morning line, and it's going to be reflected in the betting. She's going to be overlooked by everybody, and she just regressed so much. Her win in the Fairgrounds Oaks was the weakest race she's ever ran. Obviously, visually, the first time she hasn't won by more than 4 lengths. And on speed figures, I mean, the fact that she was able to regress from a maiden win to this point in her career, that just kind of tells you the trajectory she's on. And she was crying out for the wire in a race where the pace wasn't too hot that she set, yet she was still fading late, and now we're going to throw on another 16th of a mile. I don't see it. I mean, listen, she was a great 2-year-old filly, a legendary 2-year-old filly. That resume stacks up with the best of them, for sure. But you said it, Jack, they oftentimes regress, the fillies especially, and it is clear that this crop caught up to her a little bit in the Fairgrounds Oaks, and when she actually has to meet the likes of a Nostalgic, a Nest, and everything in between, a Kathleen O, so on and so forth, that's when I think the chinks in the armor will come. So even just pace aside, I don't think she's good enough, but that'll do her in. And then, of course, she's going to get the first mile probably just fine, even if they don't go too quick. But then the wall will certainly come quickly, and you'll see her fading down the lane.
And now we're going to move on to the number 8 horse in this race, Venti Valentine, a horse who I really, really liked going into the Gazelle, especially after Nest won the Ashland. I am on the record saying that she was a lock going into that race, and she lost. And I don't think that she wants to be up on the lead, which is where she was in the Gazelle. I think that she's better having a target. She had a target in the Busher Magic Circle, and she won that race impressively. In the Demoiselle, she had a target, again, Magic Circle. She didn't win that race, but she ran a very, very good second behind Nest. And then her 2 races before that, those were really strong efforts in their own right. So she's got some good upside going into her, and I think she is a graded stakes caliber horse. It's just that the Gazelle was a little bit concerning because I thought that she really should have won that race. Now, that being said, I really like Nostalgic, and I'm not using that to knock Venti Valentine or to take away what we said about Nostalgic, but I expected a little bit more from Venti Valentine. I didn't get it. And I also think she may be a little bit better going a mile. A mile and an eighth is not out of the realm of possibility for her because you saw how well she ran behind Nest in the Demoiselle. She was definitely getting the mile and an eighth, but I think she might be better mile to a 1-turn mile and a 16th. She'll win some stakes races after the Oaks, but I think she's just a little bit overmatched in here.
I think she's very interesting. I think Venti Valentine could have easily won the Gazelle if she didn't find herself on the lead. That's just not where she wants to be. And we're talking about a horse who really did put in an excellent race against Nest and finished in front of Nostalgic last December in the Demoiselle, which is great. You just wonder, is the talent there, right? How does she turn the tables on Nest? Has Nostalgic gotten better? Is Kathleen O better than everybody, right? You ask these questions. I think that she has the chance to sit a really good trip. I think that she'll probably be 3rd or 4th early on, just outside of Echo Zulu and Yuugiri, and then maybe Tunerloose is there. But all in all, I think she's going to sit a very, very good trip. Once again, the pace will probably play into those stalkers' hands more than anybody. But then it's the talent that has to kick in. Can she fully get the mile and an eighth? She hasn't necessarily finished off well in her chances to go that distance. So I would not doubt anybody or question anybody for possibly using her underneath, but I would if you're going to maybe go with her on top, because you'd have to really find that reason that she could turn the tables, and I personally don't see it. But I think she could be enticing at a price to finish some things off underneath.
Now we're going to move on to the next horse, number 9, Desert Dawn. One of the really interesting stories of this Kentucky Oak. She's an Arizona bred. To my knowledge, she's the first Arizona bred to run in either the Kentucky Derby or the Kentucky Oaks. So I know, Eric, that's a cool note for you. However, there's not really much to Desert Dawn. She's coming out of a victory in the Santa Anita Oaks. I could not be lower on the horses coming out of the Santa Anita Oaks if I tried to be. And this is someone who was preaching to the choir about how good of a 3-year-old filly at Dare Manor was. So we're definitely looking really stupid as to how wrong we were on a Dare Manor. And then really everything else before that, Desert Dawn was just well beaten in everything else. Well beaten in the Santa Isabel, well beaten in the Starlet, very much well beaten in the Breeders' Cup, and well beaten in the Chandelier. So I think her one stakes victory came against some very weak horses. And, it's a cool note that she's here, but she's just going to be the footnote of this Kentucky Oaks, in my opinion, at least.
And that's where I'll disagree with you, Jack. I think that I do think there's better in here, but I think it makes a lot of sense why she was losing those races and why she was able to finally win the Santa Anita Oaks. You go back to her 4 graded stakes losses before the Santa Anita Oaks. Every single time she was trying to close into a slow pace or a pace that was not favorable to her running style. And she was still kind of chugging along every time, but she was never going to get the job done. The race just was not there for her. The speed was always holding. Whereas in the Santa Anita Oaks, 8 Easy and 8 Dare Manor both kind of dueled, went quick enough, and that set up for Desert Dawn to pick up the pieces late and come running. They're not going to tear it down here, obviously, at least we don't think. And I think there might be some better closers in here as well, but I don't think she's crazy to think she could run well if the right circumstances play out, which they very well could. And I think she'll be outside of everybody, clear of traffic and things like that, whereas some of those other off the pace types are more inside towards those 1, 2, and 4 posts. So that's where I do see some advantages in her. And obviously, if they do tear it down, she's going to come running late, because she always comes running late. But then, of course, it is the talent. The California horses have not been exceptional this year, but I think there's potential here. Another one where I really could not fault you for using her underneath, except I do think, once again, if you think there is a good chance they burn it down, or you want to take that risk that they're going to fly on the front end and go quick enough, then maybe it isn't crazy for Desert Dawn to pull off the upset here. I do think she runs well, though, given the circumstances that it seems like will play out with a slightly quicker pace.
And now we're going to move on and talk about the horse who, if you had asked me who was going to be the Oaks favorite, I probably would have said Kathleen O, and I still think she could go off favored. Remember, morning line is not final, but it was very difficult for me to find things wrong with Kathleen O, because she has done pretty much everything right up to this point in her career. She hasn't beaten a whole lot, which that's the knock against her, is that she's been doing it well, but who has she really been doing it against? But I have a love-hate relationship with that argument. I don't love using it, but I did use it here. That was ultimately the reason why I didn't go with Kathleen O here, because I thought that the back class of the horses from the Demoiselle was a little bit better than Kathleen O. But if you like her, there's absolutely go with her, because she has done nothing wrong up to this point. She answered the 2-turn question last time, which her 3 runs before that had all been around 1 turn. And so she answered the question sufficiently in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. I thought that the talk about her was a little bit ridiculous after the Gulfstream Park Oaks, with how everybody immediately jumped to her winning the Kentucky Oaks and all that fun stuff. But that's completely beside the point. If you're a speed figure person, she's got the best last race figure going into the Kentucky Oaks, a 98 figure in winning the Gulfstream Park Oaks. So, if that's for you, it's not for me, but if that's for you, then that's certainly something that you can hang your hat on. And if you like Goddess of Fire, I personally don't like Goddess of Fire, but if you like Goddess of Fire and you respect the effort that she turned in the Rachel Alexandra, then that's a stakes placed horse that Kathleen O has gone up against. and defeated. There's nothing wrong with her. I just liked other horses better than Kathleen O. But I will say it was very difficult to find the faults with her because she doesn't have any obvious holes in her resume going into this race.
And I think that her biggest flaw is that she hasn't beaten much. I think that obviously she's beaten some Oaks contenders. She beat Cocktail Moments in the Devona Dale. She beat Goddess of Fire in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. But those are long shots. That's not a surprise to anybody that they're going to be big prices and they're going to have to take some massive steps forward to win. And you look outside of them in some of the races, and it's not like right. If you look past Goddess of Fire in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, you're looking at nothing. So that is my one concern. And then I think the Devona Dale especially, she tripped out more than anything. There were some decent horses in there, but more sprinter types who all kind of did each other in on the lead, and then that set up well for Kathleen O's closing style. I don't think this race sets up for her well. I think that she's a big, deep closer, just fine, but I don't think that necessarily plays to her hands. But she does have a lot of talent, and she does have great figures, and she's undefeated, and she wins by a lot. I mean, that's kind of what she's done in her last 3 races, which is great, but you do have to be concerned, in my opinion, about the lack of speed that will be setting up for her, and of course, facing this kind of level for the first time. She's very good, no doubt, but how good is still a question that needs to be answered.
And one of those horses who's exiting the Devona Dale is Cocktail Moments, the next horse in the Kentucky Oaks, and she's coming out of a good stakes placing effort behind Nest, and I mean, she was crushed by Nest, but she finished ahead of a couple other decent horses underneath in that in that Ashland. So, I don't have anything overly great to say about Cocktail Moments, but Cocktail Moments isn't terrible. It's just that she hasn't ever put together a win, and maybe she's a horse that you consider using underneath in this race, but there's never been anything about her that I've been overly impressed by. I picked her in the Untappable when it looked like that she was going to be able to win that race rather easily, at least going in, and that didn't happen. And her 2 runs this year have not really been anything to write home about. Again, Eric just talked about the Devona Dale, and she was crushed by Nest in the Ashland. Like, cool, you ran second, grade 1 place, but also you were not anywhere close to the horse that was winning the race by 8 lengths. So, Cocktail Moments is another one of those horses that, at least for me, she's just kind of here. She could hit the board at a price, but I'm not really going to bank on it.
Exactly. I think that she has a lot of improving to do. She has faced the best in this field before. She's faced your likely 2 favorites in Nest and Kathleen O, and been blown out by both of them. And it's, once again, very hard to see a situation where she can turn those tables. She does have a really nice win at Churchill Downs going for her. She broke her maiden by over 9 lengths, coming from well off the pace, put up a 96. Brisnet figure, the buyer, was very strong as well. So she does a lot of good things. There's no doubt about that. But she's just always second or third best, and that's not going to get you in the Oaks winner circle.
And now we're going to move on to another horse that was probably the easiest toss for me. And, she's not coming out of a bad race. It was actually a very good individual victory for her. But Canny Raid, the winner of the Bourbonette Oaks, it's just that, the form for horses coming from Turfway to Churchill Downs is actually pretty good. So it's not just it's not a purely based on she was running on the Tapeta surface, so you can completely look past her. It's just that, look at her form even before that race. She was 8th in the Rachel Alexander. We've talked about how that race was really not anything special, and she was 4th in the Silver Bullet Day. Nobody has really come from the Silver Bullet Day to do anything. I know Lacrete, the winner of that race, had a career-ending injury, but none of the horses that finished underneath in the Silver Bullet Day have really produced anything at all. And only 2 victories to her credit, one of them in maiden claiming level at Ellis back in the summer of last year. She's just a horse that's going to run up the track at the Kentucky Oaks.
Absolutely no chance. Her best race came on a synthetic track against very low-level horses, and it's very hard to envision a scenario where she runs better than 10th.
And now we're going to move on to the final of 3 Todd Pletcher horses in this race, Shahama, the winner of the UAE Oaks and the UAE 1000 Guineas, a horse that is very interesting. I've seen some people that like her. I've seen some people that absolutely don't like her. I looked past her just because of the mystery factor, which is kind of fickle to do sometimes. And, she could end up being this absolute world beater, but I just wasn't able to draw enough from her races at Maidan to be able to justify going with her here. She, like I said, she could come over here and run an absolutely huge race, but the other thing that I'm not crazy about is, number one, I mean, obviously coming from Dubai, I don't really know what she was running up against. She's also coming into this race off of a pretty significant layoff, and I don't want to take a horse whose last race was in mid-February against some of the best 3-year-old fillies that have been running and are in form right now. So, Todd Pletcher's pulled some crazy things before. It wouldn't shock me if she won this race, but there's just too much of a mystery factor with Shahama, so she's not going to be my pick in this race.
And she just hasn't ever gotten out of the gate well, which is obviously a problem. I mean, missing the break overseas is one thing because they don't emphasize the early speed like the Americans do. But she really is slow. And if she's slow there, then she's going to be slow here. And even Todd Pletcher himself has voiced some concerns over this, and she's going to have to be making up a lot of ground. And she hasn't beaten anything. I mean, if you're not familiar with the kinds of fillies that run in these 1,000 Guineas and UAE Oaks, there's always one standout and then 4 or 5 that are very below average. I mean, they'd be running in maiden claimers if they were here. So as good as she's been, she hasn't beaten anybody. And as good as she's been, she doesn't get out of the gate. She's using pure talent to win these races. Great. But it's pretty easy to win on pure talent when there's not a lot of other talent around you. That won't be the case here. And yeah, the layoff, the adapting to a whole new environment for a new trainer, she's just up against it entirely in this race.
And now we're going to talk about the final horse in this Kentucky Oaks, and that's Tunerloose, the winner of the Rachel Alexander. We've talked about this race many times throughout the course of this preview. We haven't gotten to the winner, though, and Tunerloose was the winner of this race. It was her first career start on dirt, I do believe. She had been running on turf up to that point. I don't remember whether or not her maiden race was on dirt or turf. I should have gotten that, but I don't have that right now in front of me. But definitely stakes debut on dirt, and it was a good win for her, at least individually, but it was just an ugly race to watch. Even at the time, I wasn't crazy about anything that was running in this race. And, Goddess of Fire hasn't come back to do anything. Wake at Midnight disappointed in the Ashland. Hidden Connection was the only one who ran a decent race since then. And underneath Hidden Connection, I mean, there were some stakes winners, but were those horses really anything special in their stakes victories? And my answer to that question would be no. So Tunerloose's next start in the Fairgrounds Oaks, she was very well beaten by Hidden Connection, Echo Zulu, and the third place horse, Pletcher Filly Favor in there. So not really a whole ton of upside coming in here. She's another one. She's got the stakes victory. Brad Cox has won the Oaks before, so you can't completely discount him, but Tunerloose doesn't really have anything that jumps out as she can jump into this race and win the Oaks.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Jack, that Rachel Alexander was her debut on the dirt, and she obviously handled it very well, but everything came back weak from that race. It just wasn't all that strong. She beat some okay horses, but then again, most of them didn't come back to run well in their next respective starts. And I think we saw the true Tunerloose in her Fairgrounds Oaks efforts. Pressed Echo Zulu, gave way late, got passed up by Hidden Connection in Favor. And I think the most telling part was she ran the same exact figure, and a very similar figure on Bayer, at least, and the same one on Brisnet that she did in the Rachel Alexandra, which to me means we kind of got her best in the Rachel Alexandra, and she has to take some incredible steps forward on figures if she wants to be a contender here. She's run nothing better than low 80s by all standards, and that's not going to win you these kinds of races. She'll be pressing the pace, and I don't think that's necessarily you just got to be praying for a major boost from her that, once again, you could really only pray for and kind of just hope would happen. There's nothing telling you that it actually will.
And with that being said, that leads us to where we get into our picks for this race. So I did mention the Demoiselle a little bit earlier in passing. That is where I'm going to go, but I'm not going with Nest. I said I wasn't going to pick Nest. I'm going to pick Nostalgic. I thought that victory that she had in the Gazelle, mixing up the names of the race there, in the Gazelle was a very strong effort. I think that she's really figured herself out. The 2 wins since the turf start at the beginning of the year were really good. And like I said, I think the Demoiselle was too soon for her. So it's difficult to see how Nest loses this race, but Nostalgic has been so good in her last two starts that I think it's certainly possible. Can't leave Nest out, though. She's going to be my second horse. And then Hidden Connection, I'm going to give her some respect because she does have that really good effort at Churchill. She's going to be some kind of a price in here. And I think she may hang around and hit the board in this race. But that's my top three in the Kentucky Oaks. Eric, what are your picks?
I'm going to go with Nest. I know she's the morning line favorite. I don't know if she will go off favorite. I think there's a chance Kathleen O could take some good money. Either way, Nest will be a low price, but not an unbettable price. So no worries about that, even if she does take top honors in the pools. And she just hasn't done anything wrong. And she does remind me a bit of Malathaat, not on that level yet, but she's good. She's very good. Never done anything wrong around two turns, and I just think she's just a cut better than everybody else, and we'll get a good trip. I don't have a formal, second and third, but I did mention two prices I think might be interesting in Venti Valentine and Desert Dawn. I think Venti Valentine may be more likely to hit the board, but in terms of if you're looking for someone to absolutely blow it up that could maybe win if things go their way, then that would be Desert Dawn. I'm not necessarily saying they're certain to run a 2-3, but if you're looking for the value in a race that does seem a little not necessarily top heavy, but people are probably going to gravitate towards those first 4 or 5 choices, then maybe that if you're looking for those second and third level horses in the odds, that would then be those two right there. So it's going to be a fun race. I think it's going to go the way of one of the favorites in Nest, but don't be surprised if one of the prices does run well underneath.
And with that being mentioned, that's it for this preview. Didn't mention it at the top of the episode, and that was my mistake there, but below in the description, you will see a link to our Kentucky Derby profiles playlist. We will have a profile for every single horse. We have 19 out right now. We have to do 2 more because Pioneer Medina drew in, and then this morning, Ethereal Road drew in. So we got 2 more that we have to do, and Unoho dropped out. But we will have all 20 of those. We are also going to try to have also eligibles. Can't guarantee that that's going to happen. I know I've been saying that, but not sure if we're going to have also eligibles, but we'll see about that. And then also, when it's up, the link to our big Kentucky Derby preview will be in the link or in the description below, and also the link to Racing Rundown Podcast, where you can get us every week, where we will be breaking down every race on these cards throughout, on the Kentucky Oaks card, the Kentucky Derby card. We're also going to be doing some stuff at Belmont Park that's happening on Derby Day as well. So be sure to check all that out. And we will see you for our Kentucky Derby preview. Have a good one, and hopefully we're able to help you out with something here.